Imagine waking up tomorrow and discovering that you'll never die again. No diseases, no accidents, no aging. Time is no longer your enemy. At first, it seems like a dream, but the longer you live, the more you realize that eternity has a weight. And that weight isn't in your body, but in your mind. Being immortal isn't just about continuing to exist. It's about remaining conscious while the world around you transforms, disappears, and restarts. And you can never leave the stage. Every century, everything changes. The people you love are gone. The cities you knew collapse. Customs become strange. And slowly, you become a foreigner in your own world. And that's when the question starts echoing inside you. Who am I after all this time? At first, it's even fun. You have infinite time to learn, experience, explore. You study every language, master every science, visit every corner of the planet. You can start 1,000 careers, reinvent yourself as many times as you like. Life becomes a giant lab of experiences. But the more you dive into this freedom, the more it begins to feel like a silent prison. Because over time, everything that was new stops being surprising. Infinity, once lived, begins to exhaust. And then inevitably comes the first loss. The one that reminds you that, even if you continue, everything around you has an expiration date. Friends, loves, children, grandchildren, all of them follow a path you can no longer walk. They leave, and you stay. At first, it hurts, like any grief. But after repeating this cycle countless times, the pain changes shape. It's no longer a moment. It becomes a state. You begin to miss people you no longer even remember. You long for the kind of bond that only makes sense when both people have limited time. You can still love, but can someone who lives forever truly be loved? Over the centuries, your mind tries to protect itself. You begin to forget. Small details, then big stories. Precious memories fade, not by choice, but by necessity. The human brain wasn't built to hold millennia of memories. To keep going, you give up pieces of yourself. And then a deeper question arises. If my memories define me, who am I once they're gone? The concept of self starts to unravel. You've been so many things, so many versions of yourself. You've stood for opposite beliefs, loved completely different people, believed in gods, then in nothing. You've been humble and powerful, cruel and compassionate, naive and wise. When you look back, you barely recognize who you once were. And when you look forward, you see an abyss, because you no longer know who it is that's living this eternity. On this endless journey, your body stays, but your soul transforms. Being immortal isn't like pressing pause on your current life. It's living so many different lives that eventually you stop identifying with any of them. And then, paradoxically, you begin to die from the inside. A kind of endless death where you keep breathing, walking, speaking, but no longer feel like you belong. As the centuries pass, you begin to notice that faces change, but emotions remain. Love, friendship, affection, they still exist, but they become more fleeting. People come and go. And no matter how much you love again, nothing replaces those who are gone. At some point, even the process of connecting starts to feel repetitive. Is it worth getting attached if I know I'll see it all end again? You ask yourself. But maybe that's where the value lies. Even knowing the loss, you still choose to love. Immortality doesn't erase the human desire for connection. It makes it more painful, but also more pure. After all, every bond you form is made with the full awareness that it will hurt, and still, you choose to go forward. That, perhaps, is what makes us truly human. Over time, you realize that it's not just you who changes. The world changes too. Cultures rise and disappear. Languages die. Values that once seemed eternal become obsolete. And what happens to someone who carries centuries of cultural baggage on their back? You become a stranger in every era. Fashion, customs, morals, everything reinvents itself. You watch people living at different paces, with technologies that even alter how they feel. Pain, joy, fear, all filtered through increasingly artificial means. Being immortal is like being in constant exile from your own time. You adapt to survive, but each adaptation requires a part of you to die. Each new generation forces you to reconfigure your identity to fit in. And slowly, a quiet anguish emerges, not belonging anywhere. Because maybe living forever means just that, being someone who never goes home again, because home was buried by the passage of centuries. And then you understand something essential. Endings give meaning to beginnings. When everything is eternal, nothing feels urgent. Time, which once was a rushing river, becomes a boundless ocean. Projects, dreams, loves, they all lose a bit of their sparkle when you know there will always be a tomorrow. It's like watching a movie with no ending credits. No matter how emotional it is, the story eventually loses tension. And here lies the paradox. We want to live longer, but maybe we don't want to live forever, because it's the very limit that gives life its flavor. The fragility of existence is what makes it valuable. Imagine a flower that never withers. It would be beautiful for how long? A month? A century? Eventually, you'd stop noticing it. Beauty is in the blooming and also in the fading. Being immortal means living without this dance of time. And then comes the unsettling feeling. Maybe eternity isn't a gift, but a test of sanity and meaning. Even with access to all human knowledge, even after visiting every place on Earth, and maybe even other worlds, eventually boredom arrives. And it's not the boredom of a rainy afternoon without internet. It's something deeper. It's the emptiness of having lived everything there was to live. The disenchantment of watching the same stories repeat in infinite cycles. Wars, passions, discoveries, ruins. You wonder, is there anything new under the sun for someone who's seen the sun 1,000 times? At this point, the mind begins to fragment. The human brain wasn't built to process millennia of memories. Identity disperses. Memory blurs. To cope, you might start deleting memories, reinventing the past, pretending certain pains never happened. But that also comes at cost. Eternal boredom becomes a corrosive force, not in the body, but in the soul. And you realize that the true tragedy of immortality isn't the time you have left. It's the meaning that's missing. And this brings us to final reflection. If you could press a button and end your immortality, would you? After living so long, maybe you'd realize that true power lies in choice. Choosing to live and choosing to stop. Because life, in its essence, is a sequence of cycles. Beginnings and endings. And to interrupt that natural flow might be like locking a song on a single note. No matter how beautiful, it only makes sense within the melody. Choosing to be finite isn't giving up. It's acceptance. It's recognizing that the value of experience lies precisely in its impermanence. And maybe, just maybe, the wisest act of an immortal being is to decide that they've lived enough. Eternity, in the end, isn't about time. It's about what you do with it. And your final choice may be the most human act of all. After all, maybe we never truly wanted to live forever, but to live meaningfully, that indeed is eternal.